Welcome everybody to today's webinar series. Just to make sure you're in the right one, today's topic is going to be next generation software development, hosted by Shift Asia, and we have the perfect speakers for the topic today. So before we get started, okay, sorry, my slide doesn't go. Okay, a little bit about what we do at Shift Asia. Shift Asia actually belongs to our larger group called Shift. Headquartered in Tokyo, they have about 5,000 employees global. And Shift Asia mostly operates out of Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. We have about 200 people down here. That makes us one of the largest quality assurance companies in the world. Okay, so today's webinar is going to take 1 hour. And for the audience, if you have any questions, topics, thoughts, please feel free to post it in the chat so that we can address it at the end of the session. And also, please be reminded that we're going to send out a short survey at the end of the webinar so that we can get your feedback and improve how we're doing. Okay, so let's get started. Today we have two speakers, and I would like to first introduce Dr. Asenka. He's the co-founder and CTO of Patched Codes. He's well known in the industry, but would you please do the honor of introducing yourself briefly?
Yep, thanks, Namiko. So this is my second startup. Prior to this, I was at Veracode, which was an application security company. Before that, I started SourceClear, which was one of the first companies which focused on open source security and software supply chain. My background is technical. I did my PhD back here at NUS, and I've also taught at SMU and SIT. And thank you for inviting me to this webinar.
Awesome. We're very excited to have you today, and welcome. And guest speaker from our side is going to be Peter. He's the director of software development division. Peter, would you do the intro?
Okay, thanks, Namiko. Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Nguyen. I had 10 years experience in software development, and I used to study abroad in Japan. My focus on the technology software development, and especially for distributed system, cloud services, and Asia are in charge of the software development team. So most of the time going to support the technical part of the project, and I'm going to propose a solution to the customers. So it's very nice to have you here today. That's all.
Awesome. Great. Let's get started. Thank you very much. Okay. At the beginning, I would like to show some data points on how the industry is doing. So to summarize the global software market, it's obviously still growing. It's expected to reach over 800 billion USD worth by the year of 2028, with the growth of at least 5% every year. And I think the area that we see the biggest growth in is in the light blue and gray, which is application development software. I think it's including web and mobile applications, and then enterprise software. Peter, do you see the same trend? Do you feel this is like true to some extent as you interact with clients from all over the world on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think that actually that we can feel that based on the number of clients that we are serving right now in Shift Asia. Actually, that frankly speaking, I didn't conduct any marketing research, but based on our experience, I think that we're going to have like the growth of 5% more than every year. So I think that the number is pretty much suitable for our situation right now, at least for Shift Asia. Yeah.
Definitely optimistic. Thank you. And then at the same time, if we break it down, the size of outsourcing in IT services, especially 2022 to 2032, it's going to be reaching trillion in USD, And section by section, on the right side, Navy is admin outsourcing. I think, like admin IT operations outsourced to Philippines, South America, and stuff like that, I think. And then orange, applications outsourcing, and light blue in general IT outsourcing. So I think at Shift Asia, because we do software development and quality assurances, we would fall under either the orange or the light blue. But yeah, Dr. Asenka, do you feel any, trend in your day-to-day work as you teach at universities and interact with clients?
Yeah, so I think so obviously the outsourcing market is growing, but what has happened, especially with the rise of generative AI and code LLMs, it has actually given possibility of people to actually run an outsourcing business backed by AI services rather than be more efficient, right? So I think there is a huge opportunity that will be driven by demand from enterprises as they go ahead and figure out Gen AI and try to build more applications in the long tail. And a lot of that will be outsourced just simply because there isn't enough capabilities within the companies to do it themselves.
Right. Not every company has the experts being able to use those tools to the full capability, so they decide to outsource it.
Yeah.
I see. And I think at the same time, COVID definitely pushed this trend of outsourcing as they no longer see the difference between, working with their remote employees versus outsourcing. So I think it's just, going to be a lot more every year. Great. Thanks for the input. So finally, we're going to get into the topics. We have 4 big topics to cover today. Okay, sorry. First one is going to be latest trends in software development. I think for the mass, the latest trends in the industry these days is going to be everything about, AIs and robots taking over. But as experts, what do you guys think? What are the trends that, pops in your head when you hear about the latest trends that's happening in the industry? What about you guys?
So maybe I can take a stab first, and then Peter, you can go next, right? So so when I look at it from I think from the overall perspective of software development, one thing I would like to mention is the DevSecOps integration. So I come from a application security background, and if you look at how we build software, it has really evolved in the last 5-10 years, right? So we no longer write a lot of custom code or business logic. So a lot of the software today is assembled through third-party or open source components, right? And many of them may have vulnerabilities, or they may be written by somebody, not by a company, by like an individual developer, right? So it becomes very important to manage the supply chain risk, and the integration of security practices within the DevOps process has become increasingly crucial, right? So we want to make sure that, and that's what people call this whole DevSecOps, right? So this ensures, this trend helps us ensure that security is not compromised while maintaining the pace of development. So that's one of the key things I've seen come of age. And people talk about shifting left in terms of security. So try to do as much as possible in terms of application security tooling and practices as early in the cycle as possible, right? So that's kind of one of the key trends which I've seen in software development.
Yeah, actually, I totally agree with Dr. Asanka just mentioned here. So DevSecOps is one of the best trends that we can see in 10 years 10 years from now. So because I think that why we have that kind of DevSecOps in the past, we usually have DevOps, only the development and operation based on the advanced technology of Docker and containers are technologies. So we don't have to use a virtual machine anymore. We can use containers. It means that we can push the product cycle, the development cycle into a newer level. It means that we can bring our development, we can start to develop, and we can start to deploy it into to the end users in days, in the days unit, not in weeks or months. So DevOps is going to boost the application to the market faster. But after that, because you boost the application to the market faster, it means that you don't check security There's going to be a lot of bugs and especially vulnerabilities in your software. So if you have vulnerability in your software, it's very dangerous because the hacker can compromise your system and they can take a lot of crucial data, especially personal information data, and they can use the data against your software. So after that, we put the security. So it means when you create the development, you have to consider the security part of that. You have to create when you architect your software, you have to consider the security feature in that, because security feature is not sometimes it against the user features. Like when the user want more convenience, so it means less security for a user. You have to maintain the security part and the user ability, UI usability, so that you can provide a safety and best application for a user. Yeah.
I think so just trying to build on top of your comment, right? So I think when we see, you mentioned Docker as well. So one of the key trends which has happened is around this whole containerization, right? Which has allowed us to ship software in easily manageable systems. And along with that, I think one of the major changes has been around this how we assemble software, going from like a monolith in the past where we used to build everything as a large backends to microservices, which each one of them is self-contained. And then that actually enables developers to create more complex applications. So just wondering what your experience has been with microservices. How do you, how in your work you've looked at it and how do you approach it?
Yeah.
So I think for us personally, when we look at how we start building software with microservices, this leads to a lot of new challenges for developers, right? So instead of managing one single large app, they have to now deal with multiple services and running at different, and you have to kind of architect the application from the beginning from a different perspective. So you have to make application be as stateless as possible, right? And as self-contained. So obviously there are some benefits related to that. So one of them being that increasingly enterprises are now deploying on multiple clouds in a hybrid kind of approach. So where they have diverse infrastructure and deployment needs. So building your application with microservices allows them to have more flexibility and better resource utilization, right? And it enables businesses also to take advantage of various cloud providers. So leveraging the unique strengths of each provider, right? So I think that's another key trend which I see in terms of microservices and then multi-cloud adoption driven by how we build software using microservices, right?
That's right. So I totally agree with you. So based on, as IT provider service company, so actually we have to maintain the resource that are capable of microservice architecture, especially that we have to move our developers, our resource from just only application developer, they have to move on to another one like infrastructure management. It means they need to know how to use Docker, how to use Kubernetes, a very famous microservice management software created by Google. And the other thing is, like you said, microservice come with pros and cons. The pros is that we can break down the monolithic application into many, functional microservice. And then when microservice is down, then the whole application still works. And then we can scale each microservice easier. But the cons is the development process is going to be very complicated because sometimes sometimes that it's not easy for you to run the whole microservice in your local development local PC. So you have to make a way that to allows the developer to run microservice on the cloud, and some of the service needed to be implemented on their local PC. This is a very challenging. So I think that in order to do that, we have to come up with a clean design, like clean architecture, that which part we're going to do with microservice and which part we're going to add on later. So if you don't plan that very carefully, you're going to make things more complicated, and the development team cannot move on with the keep track of the the development cycle.
Yeah. And I think just pressing on this point of the additional complexity that it brings with respect to testing, because this is something I experienced personally at Veracode, where we had a distributed team and multiple teams would work on different microservices, but they would interact with each other, right? And eventually at the end, you deploy on a single Kubernetes cluster. More often than not, you would have these dependencies. And if one team makes change to a microservice and that is consumed by the other team, and they don't inform, or they're like different Scrum teams, right? They're running on their own pace, they're sprinting. You would notice the bug quite late, like when you actually do the final deployment or close to where you're doing the staging deployment, right? So one thing that we explored as part of that during that time was to use contract-based testing. So in fact, using tools like Pact, which allow you to publish from one microservice, what are the expected contract in terms of the API response and output, and really set up producer-consumer kind of tests. So where the producer microservice would say that, hey, this is kind of what we would publish, this is what it is. And the consumers can actually put contracts, and then you can manage the testing independently, asynchronously, while still making progress, right? So I think it does bring in with its own set of challenges, especially when it comes to testing. But thankfully, there are some tools and practices we can adopt and use, especially when it comes to API testing with respect to microservices that can make the task a little easier or make the process a little easier.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I totally agree with your point. And just one more thing about microservice, the cons, because it's very hard to keep track the login of the microservice. Sometimes we have to come up with a distributed login system because each service going to call each other, and then you don't know which service break and why it breaks. It's very hard to tracing the log. So if you want to do microservice, the first thing come in your mind, you should select a distributed log tracing system. So it's more easy to keep track of the whole microservice. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Interesting. Amazing. Thank you. So a lot was talked about right now, but I think I heard that, because of all these microservices and new tools, development is, cleaner and an assembly is easier. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of, new tools and aspects that developers and project leads have to pay attention to, and then all of them interact with each other. So my question is is the development happening faster now, or because of the new aspects, are you guys actually taking, your resources, paying attention to those things?
So maybe I'll take a stab at it. So if you look at just the pace and velocity of development, it has increased tremendously, right? But over a period of time, we're also building more and more complex applications. So it just goes hand in hand with what is the expectation. So today, the kind of apps we develop interact with so many services across various endpoints, right? So I think it has improved, help improve the velocity, but along with it, it's also true that developers today are building more and more complex applications, right? So overall, huge gains in productivity, but in tandem with the fact that we are doing much more of it. Yeah.
That totally makes sense. Great. Thank you so much. So next topic, what do we have? So related to that, the productivity and all the new technologies, what do you guys think of the impact of AI on software development as a whole? As people have different opinions about the use of AI, but for example, this person, the founder of what was the tool? Stability AI. He's said in a recent conference in San Francisco that all the programmers are going to be replaced completely in the next decade or so. What do you guys think?
So I mean, I think it's important to put things in perspective, right? So when he says that all programmers will be replaced, what would be more accurate is to say programming itself will change, right? So if you think about it, if you go back all the way to the days of punch cards and assembly interfaces, nobody's programming in that way today, right? So if we were to stick to the original definition of what a programmer was, which is somebody who used to use a punch card, put it to a machine, that nobody is doing, right? So maybe in 5 years, what we think of programming today will no longer exist, but that does not mean that we will not need humans to do what this task of software development is, right? So I think in that sense, there will be no more human programmers in 5 years, but that does not mean the profession of software engineering will go away. It's just that we'll use different tools We'll use, maybe generative AI related tools to make our tasks easier and be more productive. So only in that sense, I agree with them, in the sense that programming will not look the same. But at least from my perspective, it's not like it's going to disappear. In fact, we'll need more people, if anything, to do the task of what we currently think today human programmers do, right? So I don't know, Peter, what's your perspective on this?
I really agree with your opinion, Dr. Sankhya. Actually, that replacing human programmers is, I don't think so. But I think that maybe the AI is going to create more human programmers, because it's very easy for them to catch up, to learn new things. Especially the generative AI can help you, like you mentioned, that it's going to change the way you do the program, right? So you don't have to learn a lot of stuff. So the learning curve is going to be decreased. It means that you can catch up with the new technology more easier based on the AI assistant. So it's going to help you to catch up with the new programming language. It's going to help you to fix some of the minor bugs. But the more important thing is the creativity and the problem-solving skills. So it's still need for the programmer to do that. So I totally agree with the point. It's going to change the way that we do the programmer today, but maybe 5 years later, we're going to change that. Well, when nobody is going to create HTML code or some sort like that, but they're going to focus more on the JavaScript logic part, and nobody is going to create the controller, but we have to more to the service class, sometimes like that. So it's going to change the way we do the programming, and maybe it's going to create more people to do the programming, because it's become more easier than ever.
Yeah. So I think maybe AI will not replace human programmers, but a human using AI will certainly replace just human programmers, right? So I think that's kind of the perspective. So we will need to understand that with AI, it's not happening in isolation. Like, it's not like it's only been used to do software development, right? So it's going to unlock massive opportunity in enterprises where there is need to create new software, right? And that would require people to do the critical part, like you said, design and thinking. One of the most famous kind of tool or what come off is the GitHub Copilot, right? I see someone mentioned in the chat as well. And I think they've been around almost for a year and a half. And I read the recent studies which they did internally, because you can do, they collected a lot of data from IDE, right? So, and I think what they found is after 3 or 4 months of usage, developers on average accept more than 33% of suggestions that the Copilot generates, right? So already developers, if you think about in terms of productivity, they are accepting 1/3 of the changes or 1/3 of the suggestions which the Copilot gives. And they've increased. So this is just like a auto completion, right? Just left to right, you just give a doc string and it gives suggestions. And now they're adding more capabilities around chatting and GitHub Copilot X and Copilot for Business, where you really can chat with the code bases, right? And what I've seen people use it for is where it really helps is to, if you're dropped into an unfamiliar code base, to build your understanding very, very rapidly. So if you want to know, I want to make this change, a little bit of change here, will it impact all the other parts of the system, right? Or I want to understand, hey, I want to add this new parameter to my API call. Is there any other part in the code base where it has been done? So a lot of the tasks that the human developer would take some time to do in their head by navigating the code base, by querying it, that are the places where first we are seeing in terms of the automation that are getting impacted, right? So I think for a very, very long time in future, like more than 5 years, certainly 10 years and so on, the way it will impact is mostly in terms of increased productivity for developers. And then again, it will enable them to create more software, more complex software in a much more faster way, right? So same thing we were discussing. So just the fact that we become more productive doesn't mean that our jobs disappear. And even more so, the expectation is that we be more productive because we are increasingly designing larger and larger systems and more complex systems, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So someone that mentioned about the GitHub Copilot, so it's going to make your life easier when you do the coding. You don't have to navigate the files around, copy and paste. Another thing is going to be autocomplete for you. And your point is to understand the code and to fix the code to run as you want it to be. So like you said, it cannot replace entirely the human. So it just, boost the productivity of the programmers to another higher level. Yeah.
Interesting. That's definitely a relief to hear not all of us are going away. And then it's more about the fact that the way we do programming is going to change. So I think, like in the last decade, there've been like, I've seen so many boot camps, teaching people how to do like front-end HTML and stuff. That's going to go away, right? That's going to be completely useless because that basic task is going to be taken over by AI tools. And so my interpretation is like there's going to be different tiers of like maybe programmers and developers. And then at the bottom, these basic ones are going to be replaced by AI. And then the higher level people that's going to have, full stack knowledge or know how to, take advantage of AI tools and co-piloting, those tiers are going to thrive. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, you guys mentioned that you have been maybe able to, increase your productivity, but how much do you think, like 5%, 10%, 30%, or are you guys still experimenting it?
Actually, I use sorry, I can start from there because
Yeah,
I
go
have
ahead.
GitHub Copilot, so it can boost my productivity like 20 or 30%. It depends on the application that you're working on. But the more code you put into GitHub Copilot, and the more it's going to autocomplete for you. You don't have to navigate around and then to copy and paste the code. And especially the GitHub Copilot is very good at unit testing. So if you need to write the testing code, so you can answer, and it's going to generate all of the things for you. And all of the tests you have to done is to modify a little bit to fit with your your desire, your requirement. So you don't have to write an entire code. You navigate, copy and paste, create a spaghetti code, but it can help you to do that in a very beautiful way. So from my own experience, going to be like 20%. Yeah, depend on project you are in, depend on the as well.
Yeah. So I think I agree. So pure in terms of code completion or autocomplete, I think it's similar. My experience being like 20-25% maybe. But what I found more useful is not just like the Copilot I mentioned, like chatting, right? So I see myself not going to Stack Overflow at all anymore, right? For example. So what I found it very useful is sometimes you're in the middle of this, you're using a new library, you know exactly what you want to do, but you don't know the exact set of sequence of API calls that you need to do, right? So in my case, I mean, if maybe I'm writing some model and doing some image analysis, I just don't know OpenCV is such a large library, and there are like, I know what I want, but I can describe it in English, but it will take me some time to figure out the documentation. That's where I found it's very, very useful. So you just put that into like ChatGPT and it will pop out code. Sometimes it is wrong. Don't get me. I mean, it may hallucinate a little bit. But if you know what you're doing, going from a thought in your head about what you want to getting some snippet which works, it is much faster than what it used to be earlier, where I would like run through some examples, go through Stack Overflow, and then come back and check it myself. So that's where I think there's been a more boost in productivity in terms of either using a new unknown library or figuring out what to do, which you may not have done before with the library. So going from like text to something that works, that has been very fast in my personal experience. Yeah.
Sounds very useful. Wow. So related to that, what do you guys think of low code, no code trend? It's been going on for a while. It's related to, AI because sometimes AI is in the background of these tools. But yeah, do you guys have any experience, failure, success?
So, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, from my experience, because in the past we had a project with a Japanese client. So the client, they use actually a low-code platform, not entirely a no-code platform. Sometimes you have to customize it a little bit, and then they create a B2C services like an O2O, on offline marketing. So that they launched the service to the end user, and then it run well for a while. And then when the customer they want more customized features, so our client that they had to get rid of the local platform because they cannot customize it. So this local platform is not entirely on AI. So it's just like a builder tools to help you to create the front end, create the back end server, and integrate with the underlying database. So, but it doesn't provide you a way to customize more complicated business logic. So they had to get rid entire of it. So they have to get their entire bit. They just keep a database because they need to reuse the data, and they have to create, all of things from scratch. They use another normally way, like create a backend server, create a front end, etc., anything else. So from that kind of experience, I think that the local platform and no-code platform can be good for, enterprise system, like, inside of the organization. Like you go, because everything is fixed. Let's say, for example, you have the process and you have the data and everything you were in daily tasks, everything is fixed. So you need a quick way to create an application, but you don't have another resource, IT resource and expertise to create an application. Your data already there, and then you need to create tools to integrate with your current infrastructure. Especially recently, we had a lot of clients from Japan, especially big clients. They want to boost their digital transformation. They're going to use Office 365. Most of them use Office 365, and they want to adopt our Power Platform. One of the local platform, very famous local platform provided by Microsoft. And they want to use Power Apps, create Power Apps, create Power Automate to create automated workflow, and then to gather information and put into the BI to show the current status of their business and stuff like that. And they want somebody that can consult them. So for me, a local platform is going to be good in some, like, a fixed process. Like you don't have any change, because the way that the local platform provide you to customize the thing is not easy for them. It's very hard for them to create a flexible solution that you can customize everything. Yeah, it's just my experience about that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And personally, trying to use, have you tried to use some of them like Bubble and so on for some projects?
Yeah.
And if you do know how to write code, after a certain point, you feel like you're being constrained a lot by the platform, right? So if you're a programmer, it's okay. Maybe it's easy to get started. But after a while, when even little simple things that you could do very easily in code, then you start feeling constrained, and then you think whether it was worthwhile or not. So that's very similar to what you described. And I also agree that probably the sweet spot or the ideal, application of these tools is within an enterprise where typically you already like you mentioned, there's some data here, there's some glue that you need to write, and then you want to display something quickly. And what traditionally would have required you to work with your IT team, and then they may be understaffed and not have all this time. Maybe you as an end user can develop something quickly, right? That's the only place where it shines. Because if you have to make some changes and then you have to request a programmer or a developer to do it, then there's no point of using no code, because you might have gone through the process in first place. I'm also very careful, like you mentioned, doing it with anything end user facing, because easy to get started, but after a while you would have to just ditch up everything, like you said, and rewrite the whole thing. So if you know in your mind that what you're doing, if it becomes really popular and you will invest in rewriting it, then it is okay to get started. But otherwise, from my experience, there is only a certain type of applications, typically these IT apps where you have, like earlier we used to use a lot of forms with VB6 and all, like those kind of applications where you have workflows. And then the end user himself or herself can build it, then it is okay. But the moment you try to bring in, who will maintain it after the fact or how would it go, I think that's where you end up start seeing some of the limitations of these low code, no code platforms. Yeah.
Great, thank you guys. Very interesting to hear success stories and also loopholes in using those tools. So thank you for that. And moving on. Oh, future-proof software development. This is going to be the last one today, but I think it's going to incorporate everything that we discussed, because future-proof meaning you need to be knowledgeable in all the latest stuff and be able to manipulate those tools. Yeah, so what we looked at the data previously about the whole software industry growing at the pace of 5% year on year, but I have an interesting data here. It says the global software development tools market is growing at the pace of 17% by year. That's a lot. So I don't know. My question is, how do you guys keep up with so many changes, and what goes into making future-proof softwares?
Yeah. So I think in terms of you as a business or enterprise building software, what makes it future-proof hasn't really changed as much if you think about it. So it's still based on simple things like abstraction and composition. So wherever you design a software, you try to make it as much as modular and scalable to accommodate future growth and changes, right? Uh, Prioritize things like, which is something which we don't do as much, as like security and privacy, because I think it's going to be more and more important in the future. And obviously invest and learn and see how you can adapt some of the new trends which are coming in. So the reason for that, because developers by themselves are very curious. If you as an enterprise are not going to invest in things like Gen AI, they're already using Copilot, right? So people say, hey, ChatGPT, I'm very concerned if my code goes in. But how do you know that your developer is not using it already? And banning is not a solution. So figuring out how you can allow for experimentation and innovation within your own companies in a manner that is still safe and secure. I think that's very crucial, because developers will anyways experiment and then they don't know, right? And when it comes to like, if you are a service provider, right, if you're doing a outsourcing service or something, I think there is massive opportunity that is going to be unlocked with Gen AI. You should try to see how you can climb up the value chain, which is, I think, all service providers are trying to do, which is instead of just doing testing, QA, or whatever, what is it that we can provide higher up in the value chain? Maybe it's security, maybe it is, flexibility. And then that's, I think, is going to be making sure that you are future-proof against any kind of new innovation that happens in the process of development, right? So that's kind of my perspective, both for products and businesses, and also like people who build on top of it.
All right, thank you, Dr. So from my experience from the technical capacity, so in order to create future-proof software, so the first thing is you have to catch up with the technology, frankly speaking. So because another from my experience, actually that I have a chance to work with the Japanese clients, because our marketing mainly for Japanese, for Japan. So a lot of Japanese client, they are still using very legacy system, very old system, because one of the things is they don't want to catch up in the new technologies out there. So usually that there is a very funny things that not really funny for the client, because but there is just an example, like they are not keep up with the change of the technology. So usually I have a requirement from the client to migrate an iOS application from Swift version 2 to the recent Swift version 5. It's just like, you have 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's just like 4 times that the Swift already upgraded. And the reason that the client want to migrate is because, from Swift 5, the new iOS, they cannot support the application written in Swift 2. So because of that end of the license, so they have to make the move to migrate the technology to a newer version. But it turns out that it's very difficult for you to migrate a very old Swift version to the current version. It's very easy for you to migrate from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. But it's very difficult for you to migrate from 2 to 5. Yeah. So that is one of the most important things for all the software provider service. You have to keep up with the change of the technologies, like you mentioned, generative AI, Copilot, and another things like that. And you have to, when you create a new software, you have to think the way that how the software is going to be scalable and how it's going to adapt to the new technology happen in the future. So it comes with the clean architecture, like you mentioned, and then you have to focus on, like, you have to encourage the change in your architecture as well. Because sometimes that when you use a very old programming language, it's going to low performance. So you have to change it into another, new programming language that can give more performance and more throughput to the end user to keep track of that. So encourage your team to experiment with the new technologies, but not entirely to swap from almost the whole architecture. You can encourage them to change, a little bit, and then make the other change to another things. So keep track of the technology is a very crucial part from the technical perspective, because the technology is involved daily. So tomorrow we're going to have a new technology. If we don't keep up, so we're going to be left behind, and then our software cannot keep up with the current business logic because it's used very legacy system. And one of the most dangerous thing is our using library is going to end of life. nobody's going to maintain a kind of library, so you have to change it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just from my experience with working with a Japanese client before. So I want to share with you guys. Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. I'm sure, you know, the requirements are very different and the experience is very different for clients in different locations, as, you know, maybe clients in Singapore, US may have more you know, well adapted to like latest things, but then the Japanese clients maybe are using like legacy systems and the designs like not really well thought out for upcoming changes. So yeah, that's very interesting. And so what I understood from like listening to you guys is that the future proof here doesn't mean that the software is made perfectly now and it is not going to change forever. It's more about, I guess, having a smart design that's designed well enough to adapt new languages or new changes or security threats in the future and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Interesting. So Doctor, I think you have a following, you know, online, and then you currently teach a certain audience, right? About this type of stuff, and do your, you know, students ask you frequently about, oh, what can we do? What do we need to do to make sure that our software that we're building is future proof?
I think not so much on that, but what they do want to really understand is what role, for example, AI and things like ChatGPT or Copilot all will play in future software development, right? So I think at the moment, that's why I said like enterprises, you have to assume that your developers are looking at ChatGPT. They're not like not copying code in and in the ChatGPT and trying to make changes to it. Just the same way like they were already doing it with Stack Overflow, right? So I think as an enterprise or what you want to do is to get ahead of it. So instead of actually waiting for them to do something and have a privacy or a data issue, make it easy for them, build enough tooling support and so on internally so that your developers can be more productive, right? By experimenting with these things in a controlled and safe environment. So rather than go to ChatGPT, if you yourself build tooling or you support this within your companies, they would actually be more likely to use that instead of doing this. So I think that's kind of what the direction is. In terms of teaching, it's an interesting question because we did had a lot of things around assignments and submissions that students do during the coursework, right? And then, so at least in the university which I worked on, they had a policy around the fact that they would not ban the use, but what should be done is just like anything else, right? So if it is giving someone an unfair advantage, then it is probably wrong in terms of ethically using it for that assignment. But if you use it to, discuss or figure out something and then eventually you submit your own, it's okay. So treating all of these as tools, which we can use for good or bad, but actually ultimately the responsibility lies on the human or the person doing it, right? So I think that's the balanced approach that we have taken in terms of how to enable some of these new technology and tools for development.
Interesting. Right. Those AI and stuff, they're smarter than us. They have access to more data, but at the same time, they're not so smart. So yeah, interesting. You mentioned earlier as well about because everybody's going to be experimenting and sometimes be copy and pasting what those tools have generated. Companies and especially if you're overseeing a project, you have to be looking out for that and make sure you provide like a process or guidelines to make sure that those experimentations are not going to create debt in the project in the future. So that it's going to be very challenging for businesses, I feel like, because no one's yet an expert, and like who are we going to turn to make sure that that process is there. So Peter, what do you think? What can we do to make sure that's being looked at, and then there's like a guideline?
I think that it's hard to avoid that kind of situation because generative AI is going to help you a lot of stuff. So when you use that, so it's going to enhance your your productivity and move you to the higher level of productivity. So the important thing is here in Ship Asia that we don't forbid our developer to use generative AI to generate stuff, like to help them to fix the task. But the most important thing is because you going to the way that you're going to use the tools. So if you use the tools smartly, so it's not going to replace you. So if you use the tools not so smartly, it's going to replace you, right, in the future. Sooner, because I'm one of the, because I manage like 80 people right now under my team. So if generator is going to generate you things and you don't understand what it generated to you, so it's not the smart way you are using the tools. But because if you can order the tool to generate the things that you really want and you can fix that, then it's the smart way you go into tools. It's going to enhance your productivity. So in here that we're going to enhance them to use the tools. And even though if the tools, it generate the data or it generate the output that not fit to you, and then how you going to enhance that? You need to learn more about the tools, and you find a way to customize that. Like there is a fine tuning. So actually you can fine tune an NLL model, and you need to learn that, and you need to fix the AI to generate more accuracy for you. So that is what we are trying to do right now with our developers. Not only just use the tool, you use the tools, and then it does not generate you the expected output, then you have to analyze it, and then you going to customize the tools. Basically, how we're going to train them to do that. Yeah.
I see. But I think that is somewhat still left to the interpretation of each developer or team members. So I can imagine maybe, starting now in project charter or, security requirements coming from clients, there's going to be a clause that says, okay, are we going to allow, developers to use AI tools? If that's the case, like who's going to make sure that like it's security proof, or it's safe, or it's actually being used in a way that enhances the performance of the apps, or anything that you're building?
Yeah, of course. When security leakage is just one of the most important thing when you use with GPT, especially that you cannot use like project information in ChatGPT, because that data is going to be used for for learning. So, but we can have we can build ourselves inside ShipAsia. We can use our Azure AI service in order to create another GPT level. And then that our engineer can use that kind of service. So we're going to make sure that the data is going to stay inside in the control of ShipAsia, and not put into the public. So security is very an important thing that when we do with the customers, the project with customers, with the clients, we have to get their permission before we take more action on using ChatGPT or GPT, something like that. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you so much both for very interesting, heated discussion. So we're gonna move on to questions and answers from the audience, as we have 12 minutes left. So I think we can only address just a few. Okay, what can we do? One question: what would 5G have influence on how mobile apps are developed, or the whole industry? Who would like to answer?
I can go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, I can go ahead. So
Yeah.
I don't know about the app, but I think one of the main places where 5G could potentially have influences around video. So in terms of video analytics, right? So for example, today, and this is coming from a local kind of experience in Singapore, right? So from next year onwards in construction, they have made it mandatory for all construction sites to have video surveillance, right? And these are like remote locations where you don't have network, like you don't have even power, right? And today, the way we do these CCTVs there is that they can't actually monitor them 24/7 remotely, because on 4G, the bandwidth is just too high. I mean, you're going to consume gigabytes per day, and nobody is providing that. So with 5G, there are some set of applications which will be enabled. For example, like this remote high fidelity viewing of remote sites, which could be streamed over the internet, right? So I think that it will enable some of those things in terms of in locations and areas where you do not expect high bandwidth and connectivity. Another one is actually drones, So it's quite common to monitor video live streams from drones over 5G, right? I don't know so much about the mobile app itself, but from the ecosystem and the other applications which require connectivity, high connectivity, and large bandwidth requirements, I think that's where we'll see most of the influence of 5G.
Awesome. And next question. Okay, I am currently in a boot camp for full stack software engineering. What would be the areas students like me should focus on to ensure people like me would not be eliminated from workforce? Who would like to answer?
I mean, I can go ahead. So I think we kind of touched upon this, which is so all this hype around people's roles getting eliminated. I think it's a little too overhyped. If you really think about, so it's very easy to take a bunch of tools and LLM to create a demo, okay? But a demo app is not what is required. So to really build applications, to support them in productions, to do releases after releases, AI is nowhere near all that, right? So my suggestion would be to focus on what you're doing, learn core software engineering skills, and see how you can incorporate some of these tools in your own workflow. And it may be different for different individuals. For me, I find the autocomplete not so useful because of what I'm doing. I find the chatting and navigating the the code base and APIs, unknown APIs more useful for myself, right? So my suggestion is to focus on the core skills, not worry too much about job elimination, certainly not in terms of software development, and then see how you can incorporate some of these new tools in your own workflow to make yourself more productive. So that would be my suggestion. Yeah.
And from my point of view, because usually I'm going to in charge of hiring employee developer in Asia right now. Actually, that I really don't judge the developers based on their specific skills like Java skills or JavaScript skills or any particular technical skills. But normally I'm going to judge the fundamental of software engineering. It means that the way that you go into your programming language, how to solve the problems. So one of the important thing is the problem solving skill. It's going to base on data structure and some algorithm. And even though that you have to have a solid understanding about how software works, how operating system works, how the networks, and how to connect everything together. So it's very a solid background. If you had a solid background, so you can switch to another, you can catch up with the technology very easy. Let's say, for example, like if you are using JavaScript, right? Full stack, Node.js, and sort of that, how Node.js works. So what's the difference between Node.js and JavaScript running in the browser? And then let's say that so you're using JavaScript, and then you go into EMS, and then go into TypeScript. What's the difference between all of them? So if you can answer, you can answer this question logically. I mean that you're going to be good. You can create things, you can create libraries for yourself as well. Yeah. So for like Doctor said, you're focusing on the coding skill, solid background of software engineering, like operating system and data structure, especially for data structure and algorithm as well. So it's just a very good skill that you can, you can focus on. Yeah.
Great to know. Those are really, really useful advices. Thank you both. One final question before we go. Do you think native app will be replaced by a progressive web app? What's your verdict?
So again, so no matter how much I hate the fact that we have gone from like an open web to these apps on the phones, and every time you go to a site, it asks you to prompt and install the app. A lot depends on who owns the ecosystem, and in this case, Apple, right? So simply for most, beyond the simplest tasks, the experience of a native app as supported on, for example, iOS, it's much, much better, right? And it's just that they have access to more APIs natively rather than through the web, right? So as unfortunate as it may be, it's just that it's a very tightly controlled ecosystem, and the major players have decided that you have to install an app through their app store and pay them 30% of the revenue that comes from it. So unless that changes, I don't see it going away. So I think native apps are here to stay, especially more with like the rumors around Apple adding GPU capabilities on the phone, which will allow native apps to do even more and more computation, right, compared to the web apps. So as much as I hate it, or as much as I want it not to happen, or as much as I love progressive web apps, beyond the simplest things, I think it's just the fact that it's a very vertical ecosystem controlled by a few players like Apple, Google, Android, and so on. And then it's just the experience of the app for a consumer is so much better, right? So I think it's unlikely that it will go away.
Yeah, totally agree with Doctor. Actually, that progressive web app cannot replace the native app, but somehow because again with Ship Asia we provide the service for our clients. So when a client want to create an mobile application, so we're going to discuss with them that what kind of feature they're going to use. So native app is going to have the pros and cons, and progressive web app also has the pros and cons. And based on the requirement of the client, so we're going to suggest them which kind of application that you should create. So most on that when progressive web app comes to the market, we had another way to work with the mobile platform. So it means that we had a lot of options to provide the solution for the end clients. I mean, based on the client's requirements. So we can propose them to use like native apps or just progressive web apps. Yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for the amazing discussions, both Dr. Asanka and Peter. I think it's about time. Hopefully we answered and addressed most of the questions posted in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. After the session ends, there should be a pop-up on your screen with the link to the short survey. So if you can, please fill that out. And if not, no worries. We'll follow up with our newsletter with some case studies and recording of this webinar today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Peter. Thanks, everybody.